So hello and welcome to the International Transport Forum's Ask the Author on our Road Safety Annual Report 2024. My name is Ronan McErlane from the ITF Communications team. I'm delighted to be joined by our lead author today, Véronique Feypell. This has become an annual event. At the end of each year, we release our flagship road safety publication, the Road Safety Annual Report, looking at the latest data on road safety trends and developments in up to 40 countries that are part of our permanent working group on road safety, the IRTAD working group. This Ask the Author session, the focus is on your questions. So I'd encourage you, even from now, to send us your questions using the Q&A, the question and answer function in your window. We'll have a presentation of the report's main findings, methodology and results from Vero over about 10 minutes, and then it's over to you. If you use the Q&A questions, that will help us to moderate as many of our questions as possible. If you haven't already read the report, I'll pop a link to the report in our Zoom window at the moment. As well as the report, there are 40 country chapters with detailed description of road safety developments for each country on that same webpage. If you're joining us on social media, you're very welcome on LinkedIn and YouTube. However, if you'd like to ask us a question, click on the link on those channels and join us in the Zoom with your questions. Without further ado, it's over to Vero.
Thank you very much, Ronan. Good morning, good afternoon. It is my big pleasure today to present you the conclusions of our latest annual report on road safety. As Ronan mentioned, this report was prepared with the ITF International Working Group on International Traffic Safety Data, called the IRTAD Group, and I am very grateful to all of you who contributed to this report. This report includes the following piece of information. We have first preliminary road deaths data for the first half of 2024. Then we present traffic and safety data for 2023. Then we look at the progress towards the 2030 target of the second UN Decade of Action for Road Safety. Then we have a review of road safety data for the 2013-2023 period. And the report is then completed with comparative tables on speed limits, seatbelt and helmet wearing rates, maximum blood alcohol content levels, and we also have a summary of national road safety strategies. This report is based on data from 35 countries. It's mainly countries with good quality data and which have consistent data for the last 10 years. For some indicators, you will see that we don't have the full set of countries with available data. So let's start to have a look at what happened during the first half of the year 2024. We have preliminary data for 26 countries, and on average, we have encouraging trend with overall a 2% reduction in the number of road deaths compared to the first half of 2023. And we observed a decrease in 17 out of the 26 countries. Regarding 2023 data, let's first have a look on traffic volumes. This means vehicle kilometers, and you have here a graph which shows the traffic volume in 2023 compared to the average 2017-19, which corresponds to the pre-COVID period, because as you know, traffic and mobility were severely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, which caused a sharp decline in traffic volume. So since then, traffic volume has increased in 2022 and in 2023. However, we have data for 13 countries, and we see that on average, the traffic level in 2023 remained below the pre-COVID levels. And this can be attributed to several factors, and some countries mention the generalization of teleworking, which led to less use of cars, and some countries also mentioned an increased share of cycling or new mobility devices. To analyze the recent trends in road deaths, we compare the number of road deaths in 2023 with the number of road deaths in 2022, because the year 2021 was still very much impacted by COVID. So what we see, we have data for 34 countries, and road deaths decreased in 21 countries with an average reduction of 2.7%. In the United States, there was a reduction of 3.6% in the number of road deaths, which means 1,500 lives saved, which is a much welcome news after following several years of sharp increases in the US. In Lithuania and Ireland, we see an increase of more than 20% in 2023. But of course, these are much smaller countries, so it's low figures in terms of absolute numbers. So let's look at the mortality rate in 2023. Mortality rate is the road deaths per 100,000 population, which is a common indicator used to compare countries from a health perspective. So among the 34 countries with available data, you can see that the mortality rate ranged from 2 in Norway to 17 in Costa Rica. So indeed, there is a huge difference between the best performing countries and the less well-performing countries. In 2023, you can see that we had 7 countries with a mortality rate below 3. They are Norway, Iceland, Sweden, the United Kingdom, Japan, Switzerland, and Denmark. And on the other end of the graph, we can see that we have 3 countries with a mortality rate above 10, and it's the United States, Colombia, and Costa Rica. Anyway, you should bear in mind that these graphs only concern 34 countries, which includes the best performing countries in the world. So it's important to remember that in many non-IRTAD countries, especially in African countries, you will find very often rates much above those of Costa Rica or Colombia. In Africa, I think the average mortality rate is around 20 or 22. So let's look at what's happening in the current decade of action for road safety. As you know, the United Nations proclaimed the second UN Decade of Action for Road Safety for the period 2021 to 2030, with the objectives of reducing deaths and serious injuries by 50% by 2030. So this graph shows how our member countries are progressing toward this target. And we took as a baseline the average number of deaths for 2017-19, again, because the years 2020 or 2021 are not adequate baseline due to the COVID impact. So to halve road deaths, a reduction of 18.8%, should have been reached in 2023. And what we can see is that even among IRTAD countries, only 7 countries are on track to reach these targets. These countries are Iceland, Poland, Korea, Finland, Hungary, Japan, Belgium, and Czechia. And we can see that for many countries, they are still very much behind the target. Now, if we look at an aggregated level, this means for all the countries, at the evolution since 2013, we see that there was overall an increase of 1.9% in the number of deaths between 2023 and 2013. And we show on this graph, we see very well the impact of COVID-19. The next graph is the same graph, but without the United States, because as you know, the US, which have a very large population, significantly impact the overall trend. So when we remove the US data from this data, overall, the number of road deaths fell by 12.8% over the last decade. We can see the strong impact also of COVID-19 on road deaths, followed by an increase in the number of road deaths in 2021 and 2022. And we hope that now we start a new decreasing trend as of 2023, and also with the good encouraging data we saw for the first half of 2024. When we look at the evolution of road deaths by road user category, what we can see is that against an overall reduction of 12.8%, the number of road deaths decreased for all users except users of powered two-wheelers, for whom there was an increase of 22% in the number of road deaths. And this increase is largely due to the explosion in the number of motorcyclists killed in Latin American countries. In Colombia, for example, between 2013 and 2023, the number of motorcyclists killed nearly doubled, representing an increase of 2,500 deaths. So this was a summary of the main conclusions of the IRTAD 24 annual report. In complement, we have individual country chapters, which will be updated in 2025. So in the current website, you still have the old country reports, but it will be soon updated. These country chapters include detailed analysis of road safety for the period 2013-2023. It also describes the national road safety strategy of each country, as well as the most recent safety measures. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention and remind you that next month will be very important for road safety with the 4th Global Ministerial Conference, which will be held in Marrakesh from the 18th to the 20th of February, and where we hope and we expect strong commitments by countries as well as the private sector to accelerate progress for this decade. Thank you very much.
Thanks indeed, Vero, for a great presentation and a crucial call to action for the event happening in Marrakesh next month. It's your chance now, your time to ask us the questions. Dear participants, please use the Q&A function in the window to send us, so we can help moderate as many questions as possible. There's a link again to the report in your Zoom window. That's where the country chapters that Vero referred to are, so you can compare, see data for your own country and compare across others. So let's get started with the question. The first question in from Nathan Harpham. Nathan asks, are there key themes amongst those few countries that are on track to achieve the 50% reduction? That's the 50% reduction on the UN second decade of action target. And what is helping their progress? I think you mentioned Iceland and a few others in that presentation, Vero.
Yes, that's a tricky question, but I will try to give some answers. So some of these countries did not succeed very well in the previous decade of action, and they start now to have very good results. As an example, Korea, in the past 3 or 4 years, they really managed to significantly reduce the number of road deaths on their roads. For some countries, such as maybe Norway here or Switzerland, which are typical good performing countries, we see that it's becoming more and more difficult to reduce the number of road deaths. But we should bear in mind that they have, compared to other countries, quite low mortality rates. So progresses are becoming more difficult. But we do believe that with a systematic approach to road safety, with the adoption of a safe system, progress are still possible. And countries like Norway and a few others do have as a final target to reach 0 fatalities by 2050, and this is a remarkable ambition.
Thanks very much, Vero. So as much about the political vision as about what's happening on the ground. Question inevitably on the American statistics. As Vero mentioned, we look at the data with and without the USA road safety data in it. However, for one of the first times in recent reports, your presentation shows a decrease in road deaths in the USA between 2023 and 2024. Why is that happening, Vero?
Well, it is indeed a very good news that we have an increase in the number of road deaths in the United States, because this is really big number. We don't have yet detailed analysis of why we have this decrease. What we see is a number of very interesting local initiatives. Several cities or states are adopting a safe system approach or a vision zero approach. We see also that there was a strong funding commitment with the bipartisan infrastructure law to fund a wide variety of safe system programs at the federal, state, and municipal level. So we do hope that we see the start of a long-term decrease in the number of road deaths in the US, because it's true that before 2022, there was really a very worrying increase in the number of road deaths in the United States. We should also be aware that the US are composed of 50 states, each with their own policy, their own regulation, and we have a wide variety of performance in the US. As an example, the mortality rate ranged from 7 road deaths per 100 population in New Jersey and up to 26 in Mississippi. So it's really a mix of states with very different policies and very different levels in road safety.
Thanks indeed, Vero. A reminder to use the Q&A function in your Zoom window to send us your questions. The next question in is on new mobility, the impact of new mobility on road safety trends. By new mobility, I'm going to understand e-scooters, e-bikes, etc. Vero, have you data on this relatively new phenomenon?
We are still having consistent data on how new mobility is impacting road safety. So we have scarce data either from cities or a few countries, and it is a big issue in many countries. And cities or countries which have data on the evolution of deaths among e-scooters see a sharp increase. So definitely this is a new priority for many countries and cities in the world to address this new mobility device and make sure that we do have an infrastructure which can meet the safety needs of all road users.
Thanks indeed, Vero. I'll include a link in the chat window to our latest report on safer micromobility, which came out in March of this year. Don't hesitate to send as many questions as you like to the Q&A function. The next one, picking up again on the UN target to reduce road deaths and serious injuries by 50%. The question refers to the fact that the report only refers to road deaths, whereas the actual target is road deaths as well as serious injuries. So what's the situation regarding injuries on the way to achieving this target?
I'm afraid that a frank response is that we don't know. We do have good data, at least among our member countries, on road deaths, but we are still struggling in collecting comparable data on serious injuries. About 10 or 12 years ago, the European Commission and the IRTAD Group recommended to define the serious injury based on a medical diagnosis, what we call the maximum abbreviated injury scale. So our member countries are trying to collect this data, but what we find is that they are still not really comparable. So in our report, We prefer not to have comparative table on this indicator. We will include it in the country chapter when the information is available, because still within the countries, you can look at how the number of serious injuries is evolving. But for the time being, we don't feel ready that we can compare on an international basis the number of seriously injured. But this does not mean it is not a main priority. And it's important for policymakers to develop road safety interventions which can both reduce the number of road deaths and also the number of serious injuries. And this is not necessarily the same measure. So, and insight as well on the serious injuries to be able to develop interventions which will also address the level of serious injuries.
Thanks indeed, Vero. Send your questions using the Q&A window if possible. The next question is from Leslie Mills, who asks about the UN road safety pillars and whether there is a particular pillar that's common in promoting road safety reductions in the countries surveyed. Just as a reminder, the 5 pillars for UN road safety are road safety management, safer vehicles, safer road users, post-crash response, and safer driving environments.
Well, a safe system means that they are all really important, and to have a real impact on road safety, you need to address all these pillars. Probably one which is common to all these pillars is speed. And speed is a #1 killer in nearly all countries. So this is clearly an area where all countries should act to reduce the number of road deaths. In particular, in urban areas, there was a plea in the previous UN statement to reduce the urban speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour when there is a mix of vulnerable road users with motorized vehicles. And I think this is very important and definitely an area where we can save lives, especially, as you mentioned before, we now have a new users on the road with new mobility devices. So we need to make sure that we have a safe speed that respects the need of all road users.
Thanks indeed, Vero. There's a quick poll in your window for our Zoom participants to let us know how we're doing, if these sessions are useful. Don't hesitate, we've still got time for some more questions. Next question is that many countries see their road deaths numbers stagnating. Why is this, and what can countries do to boost road safety?
Yes, it goes back to one of the first questions, saying that why some countries are on track to reach the target when we see that countries like Norway or Switzerland are a bit behind. So it's true that when you have applied already the safe system principles that you have done, you are quite advanced in managing your speed, in enforcing, it's becoming more and more difficult to have wins. So it's indeed, we see that some best performing countries are struggling and each step is becoming more difficult. Nevertheless, a country like Norway, or even for maybe last year, they had an increase. Norway managed step by step to reduce even further its number of road deaths. And in Norway, we have now less than 2 road deaths per 100,000 population. So progress is still possible. But of course, when you have reached this low level of mortality, it's becoming even harder to go further.
Thank you, Vero. We've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. There's a greeting from Sandra Velasquez in Bogota, Colombia, who makes the comment that we're continuing working on road safety. However, the results are not necessarily there yet. Would you like to comment further on the aspect of your presentation on the powered two-wheelers on motorbikes in Colombia? And do we have reasons why that figure is doubling, Vero?
Well, Yes, the number of motorcyclists killed has been multiplied by 2 because the use of motorcycles is also exploding in countries like Colombia. And in Colombia, about 60% of road deaths are motorcyclists. And the motorcycle is really the main modes of transportation for many, many people. And there is indeed an urgent need to make motorcycling safer in Colombia as well as in other countries of Latin America.
Thanks indeed. There's a question on data. It's an anonymous question. We do take anonymous questions as well. So the question is that given that there are variable baseline levels, is the standardized goal that doesn't take into consideration the baseline levels for each country, is it too crude?
Can you repeat the question?
So given that there are variable baseline levels, so there's a standardized goal that doesn't take into consideration the baseline levels in each country. I presume this question is looking at the 50% target where the baseline is which year, Vero?
Well, in the IRTAD report, we decided to have as a baseline the average for 2017-19. I don't think there is a global baseline which has been agreed. Some countries use 2019, some countries use 2020, but with the bias that the number were very low in 2020 in most countries. So I don't think that there is an international agreed baseline yet. We will see when the WHO publishes its next report. It's possible that they will take 2021 as the main baseline for the decade.
Thanks very much. Next question. We've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Don't hesitate. A question from Walter Naivoa. Would you agree that a short time decrease of road death is only possible when you address people directly, for example, via public campaigns? I think that question is looking for a short-term decrease
Yes.
of road death.
Yes, but this is partly true. It's true that when you want to change the infrastructure, it will take you more years to achieve big results. So if you want to have quick win, probably yes, a strong enforcement policy will bring quick win. But so we need to play on both fronts. We need to have long-term objectives with long-term investments, and we also need to have quick win and to apply levies where you can directly have an impact on road user behavior.
Thanks indeed, Vero. And we'll finish up just on a comment rather than a question from Sandra Velázquez from Colombia, who mentions that in their country they have many problems with motorcyclists because of lack of driving licenses, or people who are involved with injuries and deaths have a higher frequency of not having a driving license. But that also is addressed by overall policing and the safe system approach. Okay. So as there are no more questions and we're just at our time limit, we thank you very much for your questions and your participation. Thank you indeed, Vero, for another excellent, very comprehensive report. Again, don't hesitate to delve into the country chapters that are on the website. Stay in touch with ITF if you were interested in the upcoming ministerial conference on road safety in Marrakesh. We'll also be launching a safe system tool during that event. And there's a link to our ITF LinkedIn channel for you to keep up to date. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Vero.